Carlos, how does this look? You were saying before that you meet roadblocks from the education establishment, from the education institutions. Could you be a little bit more specific about what institutions we're talking about here?
You know, I think Jane mentioned a couple of ideas with gamification, and my point, Joe, is, you know, our world today is radically different than what it was when I grew up. And you know, if you think about it, over the last 25 years, we've had the birth of the internet, social media, and mobility. You know, we have these devices with us all day long that we rely on, and they weren't around 25 years ago, right? We're hyper-connected. So we've moved from a world that we've lived that was very local. Majority of mankind was born, lived, and died within 30 miles. Here we are now, anything that happens in the world, within minutes, we have it on our phone. So when you look at that particular context, you can't approach solving problems of today getting and using history. And the biggest mistake I see in most organizations is when you present a problem, they say, oh, I saw that problem in the past and here's the solution. Because you're wrong. The environment is totally different. So the roadblocks that I'm receiving and I see are not really purposeful. They're really roadblocks of history. They're roadblocks that are anti-change, because change is really hard to do. Right. And it's the reality for the individual.
But you're not going to name names?
Well, it's the large institute. I mean, if you think of what Coursera is doing and all of the online things, they're pushing, you know, higher learning, and particularly in the traditional large institutions and universities. And I applaud all of the universities that are actually experimenting with it. And I mean, it's a free model. Is that going to be the model of tomorrow? Probably not. There'll have to be a different economic model. But I applaud the fact that they're experimenting and trying new ways to reach students. And you know, in this new world, distance is dead. Who has to say that a university's territory only is within their geographical boundaries?
Right. I mean, what we also see a lot in schools, and my kids have gone to school in Germany, the IT room is separately. I think it was in the basement, and it was used to teach IT, and it wasn't used to teach physics and chemistry and the languages. Mm-hmm. You could really immerse yourself. I mean, this is what we've done over the last 3 years, worked with 80 universities around the world to come up not only with games for the kids to play, but games for the kids to write. We have created virtual labs so kids can sit in India or in Africa and do real-time experiments that happen in labs somewhere around the world. So it's not a simulation, it actually happens. Makes the learning experience really, really, really different. And I want to say something also about these massive open online courses. We have a great partner in the University of the People. They don't only offer massive open online courses, but they offer a degree to kids from around the world for free. It's a tuition-free degree that you can get either in computer science or in business. And this is quality education. The professors are volunteers from some of the very best institutions in the world, and they are leading the way in terms of how things need to get done. So there's a lot of great offers. People need to understand how to tap into it.
Could I just add one thing to that? It's not just kids who are learning.
Oh, yeah.
It's adults. Yeah. And as Gabby said, a lot of the jobs of the future don't exist yet. Tom Friedman says average ain't good enough anymore. And he's right.
Yeah.
And to compete for the jobs of the future, whether you're a kid or whether you're old, you got to upskill yourself.
Absolutely.
And that is part of the excitement of this whole
virtual. He also said
system.
It's not your parents' job market anymore, and that means all the time. You just invest in yourself and you learn and how to utilize basically everything that is at your fingertips.
Let's just clarify one point. You know, it's said those who can do, those who can't teach, and I will dispute that because I wouldn't be sitting here today but for one high school English teacher who was an absolute genius. How do you deal in the cold but fun world of technology with the need for individual inspiration?
You want to take first?
Yeah, a lot of these platforms that we're creating, as I said earlier, then are brought to communities. Either they're brought to community colleges where, again, you know, we have this one-to-one basically interaction. A lot of peer communities exist out there where kids help each other. So I don't think it's either or. I really do think these things need to go hand in hand, but people need to take advantage of what's out there and then basically bring it to the curriculum that they're teaching, and we need more openness for that. That's why we are creating specific modules for teachers so that teachers know how to embed that into their classroom. And once they see what's out there, we get a lot more people really buying into it. I think there's a lot of fear still out there, but once they see what can be done, you got them, and then you have both, the social interaction as well as, the information.
That's a great point. Joe, and I get back to the experience recently at a college, and we were talking about going online, and that issue came up. And they gave me 40 reasons why it's not going to work. We're this type of school, and we pride ourselves in our teacher-to-student ratio. And I said to them, you're making decisions based on what you know today, not on what's going to be available tomorrow. And I walked them through a very simple example. There's a startup that's just going to be putting out a product called Oculus Rift. It's a pair of goggles that gives you an immersive experience. And if you put them on, and I showed it to them, you can take a tour of a home in Tuscany. And it feels through a joystick that you're walking through the room. It's very immersive. It's 360 since it's here. And if you start putting haptic interfaces in your hands, like gloves that are there, you can see a vase and grab it and actually feel it. Mm-hmm. So my point is, at some point in time, if we're all virtual, who is to say that we can't congregate on not a Tuscan house, but on a campus, and we can all interact with people, and almost like if we were virtually there?
Can I take from the last point?
Go ahead.
I think you raised a very interesting question for policymakers. How do you motivate the teachers at a difficult time where they have the unions on the one hand trying to complain against change, and obviously we need to change a lot of things in our educational system to make it more adaptive to people's needs. How do you motivate teachers at a time where fiscal constraints mean you have to reduce salaries? And that's one of the toughest questions we have to answer. We're trying to bring opportunities for the young people by trying to create an entrepreneurship spirit, which means that it gives the opportunity to teachers to make a change for the students by providing opportunities for the students. Would that be enough as a motivator? That's a question we need to see. But it is a big challenge, and I have to recognize it.
Yeah, maybe this dates me, but I'm remembering your question, Joe. You're really saying a human being motivated you to become what you are. And what you are is pretty special, my friend. Thought I'd put that out there. But does everyone agree? Do you like Joe Klein?
Oh, please, stop this.
All right. So
I'm going to make myself obnoxious in a minute. So
never mind. But I don't think you can take people out of this. I think there will always be a role for a parent, a teacher, some member of some faith institution, a friend, this or that, who will motivate individual people. I mean, it scares me to think we could live in a virtual world with a joystick and that would be the end. I mean, kissing somebody with real germs is still fun. And strangely, and so
we'd all need our own individual tech person, because I got to tell you, the amount of times I have to go to the tech department.
Yeah, but that's our generation.
Yes.
Kids' brains are wired differently. They don't need rule books. But I am saying that I think as you think forward, and again thinking about this lost kid in the boonies of Yemen, how do we motivate this kid? I don't think it's just to surround his head with technology that maybe he has the skill sets for. It's to touch this kid, and I think that actually takes a human touch at some level.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, and so we'll go to some closing comments. But here's mine, and it has every bit to do with being my age and our age, although anyway, if you go back to those who can do and those who can't teach. Those who can teach education. And there is a major problem in our education establishment now, which dates back to 40 years in my mind, and this may be true in other countries, when the actual training, there's a difference between education and training. Education involves your mind, training involves your mind, your heart, and your body. And the military does training brilliantly in that regard. And 40 years ago, it was decided that training was inferior to education because a lot of minority students in this country were being placed in voc ed programs, vocational education programs. And a a philosophy, almost a theology grew up that every child needed to go to a 4-year academic university. Recently, I was in Phoenix, Arizona, where vocational education has become a major training ground for the workers of tomorrow. When I was a kid, you'd go into the auto shop and there'd be this old jalopy that the thugs in school would bang on with hammers. At West Tech in Phoenix, there are 14 new cars with computer analysis provided by the local auto dealers of Phoenix. And that's only one of 30 programs in the voc ed system. And now what you're finding is that advanced placement kids,
Right.
the smartest, are taking voc ed classes in the afternoon so that they can learn to be physician's assistants and paralegals, so that when they go to college they can make some money and not have a tremendous burden of debt when they go to medical school and law school. This seems to me to be a really optimistic vision of how we can match kids to skills. But I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to educators who've said, oh, but everybody should have a 4-year college education. I think that what the people on this panel are saying has been very important. People my age, to get back to it, say, well, we tried that and it didn't work. Well, that was 20, 30, 40 years ago that we were trying things. It's a new generation, it's a new world. And quite frankly, our sell-by date is passing. and we have to really look to the younger people, like the younger people on this panel, and the more visionary older people to make this happen. Now let's just go quickly down the row, and when we start with you.
I think we've had a lot of interesting points in today, and I think there is room for a PPP between the private and the public sector to get more skills, more appropriate skills for the young people and empower young people. But if you look top down, the big challenge is how do you get the global growth you need in the decades to come for all these young people around the world to have a better future than our generation? And there's no easy answer.
You know, in closing, there was a lot of lessons learned, I think, with the journey we've taken with the Networking Academy. And so what I'll summarize in, make sure you're experimenting and trying new things. Number 2, it takes collaboration. Don't think you can do it alone. The more people are involved and connected, the better. The third is understand the outcome you're after right from the very beginning. If you understand the outcome, you can work towards it. Joe challenged the status quo. Never do it. And the best advice I've ever gotten is look at the world through the eyes of a 4-year-old. They question everything, and they don't see any limits.
Absolutely true. And I would add to that I think to the success of the future, everything that we've discussed, the teacher does play a critical role. And it is a very different role from what it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, exactly as you described. If they took on more this training, coach, guide, the information is out there anyhow. But you need to show to the kids, what is this all good for and what does it lead to? And make it, just turn the way we teach around, make it more holistic and really, guide them. I think that would make a humongous difference and you could really see very, very fast progress.
3 points. Innovation. In spite of the efforts of some to mess it up, we still have the most innovative society in America in the world, and enormously creative young people who are able somehow, from very poor backgrounds, to become successful. It's a great story in America. Secondly, immigration. So many of the innovators are immigrants. And again, we're messing it up by not passing comprehensive immigration reform and letting people who want to stay here and fuel our economy. But the third point, to your point, Joe, about this disconnect between vocational training and liberal arts, many colleges now are conflating these, and you can do both. You can read poetry, you can also learn how to fix cars. I have one of my 4 kids actually learned how to do that in a major university and loves fixing cars, oh, by the way. And I think it's not just fixing cars, it's developing skills that are useful, like coding and things of that kind, that will get people reasonably high-paying jobs quickly out of college. And back to the kid in Yemen, I think sadly we're a generation off before we know how to reach him, and that is a real tragedy.
Okay, well that's it. The last point I'll make, which hasn't been made all day today, all hour, is that we are facing a global problem with boys. Boys are falling behind girls. I think that in part that's because girls are naturally superior, but that's just my point of view. But I think that part of the answer to educating and training boys is moving from a two-dimensional classroom situation to a three- and four-dimensional form of education where they're manipulating keyboards, but also learning geometry by building houses and so on.
Yeah.
I think that we are well past the time when the encrusted institutions of the past, and we've mentioned a few of them today, should be determining our children's future. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. I wish we had time for questions and answers.
Thank you.